killings burst out in a shark frenzy in that sorority house. There was a shark frenzy.
The serial murderer doesn't have boundaries, so it's as if a trigger is set off and they become not angry, they become rageful, to the point that when you see the viciousness of the killings that they commit, you're taken aback. You think, well, how could this mild-mannered person do such horrendous things to another person, a human being?
It had been just 2 weeks since Bundy had escaped from Colorado. Almost 3 weeks after the Chi Omega attacks, a white Dodge van was reported stolen from the media department of the Florida State University. 4 days later, it would resurface 100 miles away in Lake City. 12-year-old Kimberly Leach was attending junior high school. About to start a PE lesson, she realized she'd left her bag in her homeroom. She was given permission to return to the other building to get it. She did not return. That morning, a witness saw a young girl, close to tears, being pushed into the passenger seat of a white van by a scowling man. He assumed him to be an angry parent. That same morning, another witness saw a white van swerving, almost out of control, on the highway, the angry driver shouting towards the passenger seat. Just days later, the white van that had been stolen from the university in Tallahassee was recovered.
We had already driven it. It had driven some 500 or so miles. And we found signs of trauma in there. There were branches and leaves and hair and fiber evidence. Price tag with a $26 figure on it. We think that he went by Green Acres Sporting Goods store and bought a very large knife, which was a hunting knife. And we believe that he used that when he killed Kimberly.
It would be 2 months before police officers discovered Kimberly's 12-year-old body dumped in an unused pig pen in woods 25 miles from her home. At 1:30 a.m. on the 15th of February in Pensacola, Florida, a man was spotted in his VW Bug, acting suspiciously.
An individual driving a Volkswagen was kind of loitering behind some stores over in Pensacola, was observed by a police officer in Pensacola, tried to stop him. The guy ran first in the car and then fled the vehicle, and the officer chased him down. There was an altercation. A shot was fired, missed the person, but he was taken in custody. Initially, he told us that his name was Ken Meisner. Then later on, he told us his name was Theodore Robert Bundy.
Those that had known the charismatic young Ted were dumbstruck.
When Ted Bundy was arrested, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I remember my stomach dropping out.
Ted Bundy was in custody again, but his capture would spell just the beginning of an extraordinary 11-year circus. (1979), Florida. Ted Bundy had abducted and murdered dozens of young women across 5 different states and escaped from capture twice. Now he would stand trial. Bundy would be tried twice. First for the brutal attacks on the students in the Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee. Then for the kidnap and murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach in Lake City. On the 25th of June, Ted Bundy took the stand.
Please state your full name. Theodore Robert Bundy.
The former law student, against the advice of his counsel, had decided to defend himself.
Serial killers are desperate to be at the heart of the story. Defending yourself clearly is going to allow you to draw a great deal of attention to yourself. And Bundy, of course, had this fantasy that he was a very good law student and could have been a good lawyer. This is all part of the fact that serial killers often operate on a surface level. They don't have the depth to commit to a period of studying for a law degree. So it's all surface, it's all froth, it's all fantasy. But by engaging in that fantasy, by defending himself, he's at the heart of things.
You say you knew Theodore Robert Bundy on August the 16th, 1975?
What we have to prove in a criminal case in the United States is, in essence, guilt to beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. He thought he could create this serious doubt and that he would be found not guilty. He was very sure of himself. He asked very good questions. But he didn't learn the first lesson in law school. The first lesson you learn in law school is never represent yourself.
Defending himself, Bundy chose to cross-examine vulnerable witnesses and victims, a tactic that forever damaged his image in the eyes of the jury.
In the adversarial world of the courtroom, his lack of knowledge, his inability to defend himself because he's guilty is going to be laid bare. So this is really one of the miscalculations, it seems to me, that Bundy makes.
Don't shake your finger at me, young man. Don't shake your finger at me, young man.
During the trial, two events would seal his fate. Carol Duranche positively identified Bundy as the man who tried to kidnap her from the shopping mall in Utah. Most damning of all would be the bite marks recovered from the body of Lisa Levy. Anne Rule attended the trial. She still found it hard to believe the friend she'd once worked side by side with on a suicide helpline could possibly be a savage serial killer.
The afternoon testimony came from Dr. Richard Souveron, who is a forensic dentist. He testified that Ted had bitten two of the Chi Omegas and left teeth marks in the breasts and buttocks of one of the dead girls. Our teeth are almost as good at identifying us as our fingerprints. And Dr. Souveron was explaining where all these marks and how they matched exactly with Ted's. He had very unusual teeth. And he said there's no question but Ted Bundy bit this girl either before or after he killed him. The court was over and Ted was walking out of the room, and he was always handcuffed and manacled. And he was carrying his files, as he usually did. And he looked at me and he went, like, I didn't do it. I have no part of this, but I knew he did do it. I went down the hall and threw up because I had to accept it at that point.
Theodore Robert Bundy was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt.
Ted Bundy's fate is now in the hands of Judge Edward Cowart. The judge will announce this afternoon whether he will send the former law student to the electric chair. Yesterday, the jury heard Bundy's mother ask that her son be spared, but the state reminded the jury of the victims.
How nice it would have been if Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman's mother could have been there on the morning of January the 15th of 1978 and asked for mercy for them.
Bundy was sentenced to death by electrocution. But the conviction would be just the beginning of years of schemes and appeals as Bundy's celebrity grew on death row.
When he would talk to you, you'd have one face that would be looking at you, but you always felt like there was a game going on.
Law enforcement had lists of missing girls that they and their families wanted information on. But all the while, Bundy continued to plead his innocence.
The serial murderer doesn't necessarily want anything more than to demonstrate that he is the most valuable individual at that point in time. Getting them all wound up, getting them to the point where they're frenetic about getting him to confess to his crimes. But all the time, he is in total control of his world. And that's basically what it is, total control of the world.
Only when facing almost certain execution, after 11 years on death row, did Bundy finally start to confess.
He lied to his family about it. His mother and his wife at that time completely thought he was innocent. And in the last couple days, he told them the truth, that he had committed these murders. It wasn't a big humanitarian effort on his part. He wanted something out of it, and I'm sure it was probably, if it only to prolong his life for another few weeks or whatever it was, that he was able to manage.
Just days before he was to be executed, Ted Bundy began admitting the hideous murders of at least 36 young girls across America. He had dumped many of the bodies in the mountains or in woods, and he had often returned to them to commit necrophilia. He had sometimes brought the heads home. Ted Bundy was executed by electrocution on the 24th of January 1989. But was this killer of innocent young women created by nature or nurture? Was he damaged as a child by the lie that his mother was his sister? Was his latter rejection by his dream girl the catalyst for his crimes? Or was Ted Bundy simply born to kill?
I've never wanted to believe in the bad seed, that a child is doomed from the beginning. But if a child with the tendency to violence is born into an abusive household, then you have the perfect soil to grow a sadistic sociopath. He wasn't crazy. He was not crazy. He knew what he was doing. He covered his tracks. But he was addicted.
There seems to be some indication that even when he was a child, he had no real close emotional attachment to anyone. The basic personality is there when the child is born. It's acted upon by the environment. So was he born to kill? There had to be something in this child's genetic makeup that said, all you need is this certain environmental trigger, and then you'll be able to start your fate.
I've absolutely no doubt that Ted Bundy had a set of circumstances in his childhood which were very unusual and potentially incredibly damaging. Ted Bundy was not born to be a serial killer. It was a choice that he made as he grew up and felt that there was no other way of resolving some of his underlying psychological problems.
Bundy himself gave Corrections Officer Paul Decker a chilling insight into the motives for his crimes.
He was resting and kind of relaxed at that point, and I said something to him about, Ted, why did you, what did you do all this for? And he says, I liked it. There was no discussion about, oh, it was a mental problem that drove me to it, or any kind of a thing.